Okay, everyone. Welcome to the final chapter discussion, chapter 25, the White Supremacy System, the White Supremacy Mindset, and the AIDS Holocaust. Wow, it's been a grand journey, but all great things must come to an end. Um,
Yep. This chapter is a very um, interesting chapter. I think I maybe hadn't put AIDS in its proper context, maybe because it was a little bit before my time. But yeah, the context you put AIDS into, it's definitely just another another white supremacy tool being used against non-white people across the globe. Very short chapter, but very necessary.
yeah, I think this chapter is a chapter that every Black person should read because I think a lot of Black people know about the syphilis Tuskegee experiment. They may not know that that experiment lasted 40 years. They may not know how many Black people that experiment um affected. And also syphilis as like a disease, as a tool. Syphilis is a very like universal like tool because it's a disease that has like certain properties that allows it to become many other diseases given the correct science are applied to it. And it's so funny that I read this essay and it talks about like the syphilis being used against Black people. And then I'm also reading this other book written by a white person, and he talks about how syphilis is like proof that he just mentions syphilis in a way that validates what Cress Welsing is saying, and his book is on a total different topic. And it's so funny how the universe has like aligned me to like read this, and then also read that work by Frank Rudolph, Psychomancy, which talks about which gave some light on like how syphilis works and like how it's like a manifestation of white supremacy. Anyone have anything they'd like to share from the beginning, from earlier pages?
What did Frank say about syphilis and how do they align you? So I'm curious about that.
He just says how syphilis.
I checked the chat. You didn't post the book in here.
I did put in there. I don't know why you didn't get it. Um, but he just said how syphilis just can change. It can change. Can change. And I don't really care to get all into what Frank Rudolph wrote about, what we're supposed to be talking about, what Cress Posting wrote about. TBH. I just wanted to mention how it aligned for me personally. And I don't have anything like to comment on uh, until 294. So if anyone has anything to share prior
Well,
to.
I had a question.
Mhm.
My question was like, what do you think the significance of like this being the last chapter is in terms of like, yeah, the significance of this chapter in the book?
I feel like it's kind of like the latest thing, or the last thing that kind of happened in her time, or maybe like the thing that's currently going on that's plaguing like Black people. And I think she kind of wrote it because she kind of like, at least for me, it seems like she doesn't really know like what the outcome is. Obviously, like people are dying and whatnot, but like for her, this is the most current thing, the most apparent thing. Um, attacking and killing Black people. That's at least how I saw it, and I think that's the reason why it was the last thing. I think it was just the most recent thing that's been going on for her to comment about.
I think that's a great question, Ash. And I'm gonna read this to before I start my answer. If you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you think you understand will only confuse you. Neely Fuller Jr. Quoted from 293 of the ISIS papers. And I think the reason for this chapter being the last one is because this is like a look into she calls this the white supremacy mindset. So we've been learning throughout the book we've been learning about like how they symbolize things, how their mind works. But now we're seeing how they like plan destruction, and like we've gotten glimpses of that from the Holocaust chapters and essays. But she's talking about how it's evolving and how like they've always have used biological warfare against Black people. So we should not be like called conspiracists for like understanding that they're using diseases to like eradicate Black people. You know, we should not, you know, and I think that's why it's like really like profound things, but the way she decodes everything and breaks everything down, you can totally like see where she's coming from and follow the logic.
I totally agree. That was an amazing question that you asked, Ashley. I feel like my thinking is that the significance is that this is, of course, all of it is very important, but this, I believe, is one of the most important chapters because it talks of a scientific biological warfare that's currently happening and is continuously happening. Like they don't just throw away these patents, they're constantly trying to develop them in more and more ways and find new ways of distributing them. Like look how recent Ebola was. I can't wait for us to talk about that. I've got a lot to say about that. But yeah, I feel like the significance is that it's ongoing and it's by far one of the most scariest and treacherous ones. I feel like the chemtrails in the air are bad for our melanin. I feel like a lot of the medications that we have, like the way that is tested, is done on white lab rats versus brown, Black. So like medication is literally made for Europeans, like for their own betterment. And if the after effects, if it harms us, I feel like that's a plus for them. And I feel like medication, they talked about a lot of these strains and biological chemicals being made in Germany, and Germany is one of like the widest exports for like vaccinations, for medicine, for just different things. And I feel like even the latest vaccinations that they want us to have for COVID come from Germany. And as soon as I heard that the UK bought over 200,000 vaccines from Germany, I was just like, that's not going in my body. That's instantly what I knew and understood, because I understood that like you don't just stop in your research of like how to destroy melanin. I feel like they find more ways to try and perfect it in the sense that it doesn't harm them and it will harm melanated people. And so under that basis, I won't be putting no vaccinations in my body.
Anybody else care to answer Ash's question?
Yeah. Personally, I think all this stuff I learned as a kid about AIDS was propaganda. Like I had no idea that there was this African green monkey and the bird monkey. All these things were theories. I just remember learning about AIDS, and someone said a Black person fucked the monkey and got AIDS. So that's what I had thought, and I do think the reason why this chapter is at the ending, because first she indoctrinates us until we are thinking where we're able to decode symbolism, we're able to see logic, and how thought patterns have how games are played, all this stuff. We kind of get the foundation, and this chapter she's giving us the like, okay, this is what we're up against. This is the actual problem. This is what the problem does. It's a genocidal, diabolical problem that has no problem using biological warfare. It's insidious in nature, and I do think while she was writing this, AIDS was on the television, so AIDS was definitely like a hot topic, probably like the coronavirus is now. So yeah, I think that's the best way I can answer the question.
All right, everyone, thanks for answering. Yeah, and just to correlate the coronavirus with the AIDS Holocaust, 294, George Santayana, the American philosopher, has left to posterity challenge. Those who do not know history and do not learn from history will repeat it. Who's dying more from the coronavirus? White people or non-white people? I'm sure it's non-white people, especially Black people. So we're constantly repeating history because we as a people have failed to analyze, identify, and neutralize the problem of racism, white supremacy. And there's going to be a thousand more Hitlers, and there needs to be 1,000 more soldiers who are aware of what's happening and that this system produces Hitlers, produces Dylan Roofs, produces Brennan Tarrants, produces white supremacists who are on this planet to kill and mistreat Black and non-white people. And until we get this together, we will remain totally confused, as she states, as to what's happening around us. You don't have anything to share?
Yeah, I'd like to read. Thank you. I'd like to read this part of the statement that she makes on 292. That just to like really get into the psyche of like pro war individuals, those who practice warfare, who are practicing white supremacy warfare on us, just to like really, yeah, here we are. Killing is not as difficult as it used to be. The modern administrative apparatus has facilitated for rapid, concentrated movements and for efficient, massive killings. These devices not only trap a larger number of victims, they also require a greater degree of specialization. And with the division of labor, the moral burden too is fragmented among the participants. The perpetrators can now kill his victims without touching them, without hearing them, without seeing them. He may feel sure of his success and safe from its repercussions. This is every growing capacity for destruction cannot be arrested anywhere. This ever-growing capacity for destruction cannot be arrested anywhere. Like that was super important, like to read, and like my body kind of went cold when I originally read it because I completely understood like the mentality and the rhetoric of like how out of sight, out of mind, how as long as they're not physically seeing it, or if there's a way that white supremacy can like not take the blame, they will not, and they will definitely put it onto like Blacks, like how like Black and African people, like how the Ebola epidemic has been what's that word? There's a terminology that you use for like
Euphemism.
Okay, so say one more time.
Euphemism.
No, okay, so you know how Breaking Bad had mentioned it so many years before it's outbreak in West Africa.
Predictive programming.
Yeah, predictive programming, and Simpsons had mentioned it as well, saying it's something. So this long-term predictive programming that's occurred just shows you the white supremacy mindset. As long as they can get you to believe that it comes from you, they have no way distributing it outside and killing millions of people and then maintaining that white is innocent mentality when you've embedded it into every fabric of society to employ and do what you want to do. That just showed me the levels of scary European white people have. Before I even understood white supremacy, I understood predictive programming. And but to understand it on this on the scale of white supremacy that it sits, it's very worrying and troubling for me. And reading that statement just lets me know that that mindset, that a silly will literally not feel any pain and sleep with a clear consciousness because it wasn't a physical stabbing in front of them. Like they've been able to remove it as just a plot to like continue their supremacy rule and maintain that order of being the cleanly, civilized, and all-powerful race.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mary. Yeah, it's like, it's and a racist suspect is quoted saying this, white people will practice racism even if they need to destroy the planet to do so. So that's why I think we are in dire times. This crisis has like it's like if it was a code red now, it's like code black, code chaos. I don't know what they even call it, but we need a critical mass of black people and the non-white people who are not anti-black. Solving this problem. Like seriously, this is enough. Like it's 2020. Neely Fuller could deserves to live a day without racial white supremacy. So, if we all practice deep self-respect, started to understand the problem, overnight we would see changes of the system crumbling.
Swall, did you say you wanted to read some stuff from 24?
Oh no, I didn't say that at all.
Oh, well, this is this whole thing from 24. I think we should read together the whole page where it starts at George Santayana. So those who have their books ready, I think we should read this together. I'll start on page 294. George Santayana, the American philosopher, has left to his posterity the challenge. Those who don't know history and do not learn from history will repeat it. From the aforementioned information, I conclude the following. If you attempt to understand biological and chemical warfare without understanding white supremacy, you will only be confused. If you attempt to understand the killings of gypsies in Germany under the leadership of Adolf Hitler without understanding white supremacy, you will only be confused. If you attempt to understand the killing of homosexuals in Germany under the leadership of Adolf Hitler without understanding white supremacy, you will only be confused.
If you attempt to understand the killing of homosexuals in Germany under the leadership of Adolf, oh, you just read that. If you attempt to understand the Holocaust of Semites of the Jewish religion in Europe from 1933 to 1945, wherein 6 million, is that the number?
Yeah.
Semites were slaughtered under conditions of mass deceit with the awareness of other Western white powers. Without understanding white supremacy, racism, anti-Semitism, you will only be bewildered and totally confused.
Anyone who has not mastered an understanding of Germany under Adolf Hitler's leadership and the Holocaust of Semites and cannot possibly understand the AIDS Holocaust of 1980 to 1991, wherein 50 million to 75 million deaths of Black people on the continent of Africa and elsewhere have been planned and projected. If you attempt to understand...
If you attempt to understand the AIDS Holocaust without understanding white supremacy, you will only be confused and you may be dead. Should I keep going? The word Holocaust is defined in this paper as the massive planned slaughtering by whatever necessary means under conditions of major deception of people classified as non-white, conducted by people who classify themselves as white, for the specific purpose of depopulation of non-white people under the specific conditions of white supremacy domination.
Yeah. I think now we can understand why Bill Gates is so concerned about sterilizing non-whites across the world. First, white people like to say it's Agenda 21, Agenda 21 white supremacy. Bill Gates is a white supremacist. He proves that by, terrorizing and mistreating black and non-white people by causing them to have, birth defects and sterilizations and all that mistreatment they suffer under his vaccinations and so-called charity work and progressive work helping third world countries. So I think understanding like how this depopulation, sterilization, like all this stuff like is interconnected and all is a root of white supremacy. We can all understand like where these conspiracy theories come from. Everyone's always trying to project the big bad evil onto like nonsense. Like they want to blame the reptilians or the aliens or the elite when it's white supremacy and white supremacists, the white domination. And this includes like the everyday common white person who is complacent and watching black people die every day, who doesn't say, hey, we should end the system of white supremacy because it clearly is destroying Africa and destroying black people and non-white people. But white people will never say this, so it's up to us black and non-white people to solve this problem, or we will continue to be destroyed and it will be made a joke. White people will continue laughing at our demise, and they will continue training black people to laugh at their demise.
I think you make a really good point, and it reminds me of like what you were saying about the white people who are into a lot of like the conspiracy theories that talk about depopulation. You can really decode it now with like Dr. Welsing's work, like, and how they talk about the Jews are controlling Black Lives Matter. It's like they have this idea that the Jews are controlling this black group that causes miscegenation that will eradicate the white race in the future. And it's unfortunate that a lot of black people feed into like those types of groups and stuff.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna read from 296. Semites who left Africa and eventually attempted to settle in Europe miscegenated further with white-skinned people on the continent of Europe and continued to lose much of their melanin skin pigmentation. However, because of the dominant character of the African black genotype, including hair texture and facial features, there continue to exist evidence of African genetic heritage. Because of the dominance of African or black genetic heritage, genetically recessive white skinned people of Europe continue to fear the possibility of white genetic annihilation caused by the Semites. Thus, there was a 2,000-year history of white hostility towards the Semites or colors of the Jewish religion on the continent of Europe, in spite of short periods in which the hostility of whites towards the Semites was less intense. So it's a long history of the Jews being mistreated over there in Europe. And it looks like in 1933, it just was a moment of intensification. So I guess this period right now would be called the less intensified period if the Jews hadn't said, no more. So it's time for the blacks to say no more because our Holocaust has been going on for about 400 years. I would say I would say about 4,000 years, 2,000 years plus. About the same time, the Jews just got off. The Jews just are less of a target, but they're still a target. Once they get rid of the blacks, they're gonna start looking at the Jews again. So you don't have any comments, anything to share?
Yeah, I think what we just read can be applied to any type of area in the people activity. It could be applied to labor, law, religion, sex. If we don't understand white supremacy, then you won't understand why religion is institutionalized. You won't understand why, like, your kids, the more they go to school, the more defiant they become at home because they're being taught self-hate. You won't understand a lot of the things that directly affect your life if you do not understand white supremacy. Like when your child comes home from school and he's being bullied, you won't understand that bullying is a direct result of white supremacy. Because white supremacy encourages the subjugation of all non-white people. So when you have a bunch of non-white people in grade school, they're gonna treat each other poorly because they're trained to do so. I think that's the way she wrote that was really necessary. Like if you don't understand these things, you will be confused. And to me, that's very very relevant to today. People don't understand white supremacy. That's why they're clapping and cheering for Joe Biden. People don't understand Kamala's role in racism, white supremacy. That's where they're like crying and shit by seeing her on TV because they've been so programmed and demoralized and so brainwashed and made brain dead that they don't even know that all of this stuff that's happening to you that you're seeing is for your demise and to sustain your demise. That's what I.
Yeah, yeah, like yeah, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she always has said that, like something like the Holocaust could happen again. Like, and I think what she meant by that, by like how like just the overt nature of it. And as I read this part right here, Adolf Hitler is in 297. Adolf Hitler, who came to power in Germany in 1933, became the most forceful articulator of that most fundamental of all fears of the global and local white collective, the fear of genetic white annihilation caused by people classified as non-white. Indeed, it can be said that Hitler was the highest crystallization of the white supremacy mindset based upon the fear of white genetic annihilation and its companion thought, white genetic survival by any necessary and conceivable means. So, if it means creating a disease to kill millions of black people, yes, they will do that and act that out. We've seen that happen for 40 years, Tuskegee experiment. So, the proof is in the pudding, and we just have to, apply history to our future, to our survival. White people, if they want to try to make like a correction of this problem, understand, like, confess, their wrongdoings, you know and give black people what they owe, and give them like land to be away from white people, because white people are too dangerous to be around for black people, and history has proven that. you know it's,
Yeah, I struggled in reading this chapter because it was just very painful. It was very uncomfortable, and yeah, I hated Bill Gates. Before I hated him, I just knew he was a very rich man who made Microsoft, and then I hated him once I learned the knowledge that he had gone like to lots of West African countries, in particular Syria, and under the name of like vaccination had killed so many kids under sterilization and injections that they will die from like the following day. And the fact that he was allowed to continue going around to call himself a philanthropist, to like sit on TED Talk stages and talk about the amazing work he's doing around the world in terms of helping the population. So he's literally saying what he's doing, but under the consciousness of he's doing good for the world. They've convinced themselves of this within their bubble of elitism that people support. And it's very like painful to think about. And just the way that he's taken on that title now, I believe that it was it's the second, like there's a statement that's made in the page, I think it's 298 at the top, where Dr. Frances Cress Welsing mentions from the book, The Psychopathic God. I'll just read it out, which talks about Adolf Hitler. Toward the end of February 1942, just after the 1Z conference, which organized the final solution to the Jewish problem, Hitler listed himself among the great benefactors of mankind who had isolated dangerous disease germs The discovery of the Jewish virus is one of the greatest revolutions that has ever taken place. The fight we are carrying on is one of the same nature and as that is waged by Pasteur and Koch during the last century. How many diseases have their origin in the Jewish virus? We shall retain our health when we eliminate the Jew. Like just like how coronavirus has been used to control us and keep us at home, they use health and they use under the banner of health. They've killed how many millions of people, calling it a virus, calling it a virus, but really and truly the virus is their mindset and their place, and like saying West Africa is disease ridden, but yeah, through their bestiality or association with monkeys, they have now contracted all these diseases. And then once you come over here now, you have to be quarantined. You have to like declare that are you gonna get malaria? Like all these controls through health are done, but it's usually there for our extinction. And making that distinction makes me want to be like so like making that distinction makes me want to be like so on point with my health. But the statement that I want to make is the fact that he's glorified as somebody who has a benefactor for mankind, which is the same story as Bill Gates. They're almost one and the same. I don't know if Bill Gates has been able to kill more people in the time that Hitler had done in these silent years that he's been going around being a philanthropist all around the world, sterilizing Black women of preventing them from like literally going out and being a hero for white supremacy. He is Homelander at this point.
Yeah,
I wanted to comment on what Mary was saying, you know, that especially regarding Bill Gates, you know, I also really hate that man. And for me, one thing that was very sickening and upsetting was watching him on like TV talk about coming up with a vaccine, knowing what he's done to Black people with his vaccines in the past, and you know all of them coming out and begging for a vaccine. And it really goes to show, you know, that lack of group respect that Dr. Welsing talks about. You know, if a man like Bill Gates was going around and killing millions of Black children, and the response is to, you know, treat this guy like he's a philanthropist and he's doing great work in the world, really goes to show like the condition and where Black people are out. I don't hear anybody bringing that up about how he's about all those horrible things he's done in Africa, but everybody seems to be ignoring it.
Yeah, because it functions to serve like the system of white supremacy, which is mistreating and destroying non-white people. And I think on page 298, I think this passage like just a great example of like the unified field theory, just how everything is interrelated and like how like white people across the globe 24/7 are just thinking about how to destroy and mistreat Black people, non-white people globally. So this is on 298, and it says in 1932, the year before Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany, in Tuskegee, Alabama, USA, another destruction was being conducted against people who were classified as non-white by people who classified themselves as white doctors, scientists, and government officials. This planned destruction was the Tuskegee syphilis study. From 1932 to 1972, a total of 40 years, United States Public Health, Macon County Health Department, Tuskegee Institute, Veterans Hospital, and Tuskegee, and private physicians in and around Macon County deliberately planned to withhold treatment for more than 400 Black men who were suffering from syphilis. It was verbalized that the program would be a means for getting rid of the Black people in the US. This destructive deception recently ended under pressure in the year 1972. very shortly after the disease, which we now refer to as AIDS, began to surface in the US. So I think it's just like really telling. The logic is there, the proof is in the pudding. Everyone should definitely read the ISIS papers and read this book. And if you could find a copy of the book A Survey of Chemical and Biological Warfare by John Cookson and Judith Nottingham, preferably an unedited version of that book, you could do your own research and see that AIDS is another example of smallpox that killed natives. A weapon, massive destruction created by white people to kill black people. And yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is going back to the point I made when we were doing our opening comments. I did not have adequate information to believe that AIDS was a biological weapon. I don't know what it was. Now I'm very much aware that it was a BW, biological weapon, created by the U.S. government to depopulate black people from planet Earth, to kill off hordes of black people discreetly. How in this book, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing reiterates how long it took for them to come up with a vaccine, how they were fumbling all the research, and just all these things because they really weren't trying to stop what they had clearly started. I personally think the cure or whatever for it is available now, just only to white people. And we have a living example. I think what's that guy's name? Michael. I'm not Mike.
Magic Johnson. I thought about him too.
Yeah, Magic Johnson has AIDS and he's living with it fine. Lots of money. White wife, I think. So I think just to add more context, I should read this quote. I'm gonna read two bits. In 1969, a book entitled A Survey of Chemical and Biological Warfare by John Cookson and Judith Nottingham was published by the Monthly Review Press. The book is described on this cover as follows: derived from a 3-year study conducted by a British biochemist and geneticist and a British political scientist. The text affords a comprehensive review of materials used and policies adopted by authorities in the U.S., Canada, Great Britain, and West Germany. It also states that it provides one of the most comprehensive views on the subject of chemical and biological warfare written for the layman. The authors, who are well qualified, produce a vast amount of documentation on the use and research on these types of weapons. On page 322 at the bottom of the page, the authors state, the question whether new diseases could be used is of considerable interest. Rabbit monkey disease, African green monkey disease, may very well be an example of a whole new class of disease-causing organisms. Handling of blood and tissue without precaution causes infection. It is unaffected by any antibiotic substance so far tried and is unrelated to any other organism. It causes fatality in some cases and can be venereally transmitted in men. In the words of Dr. C. Gordon Smith, it has possible potential as an infectious disease in man. It presumably is also a BW, biological warfare and by biological warfare interest. New diseases are continually appearing. Chikungunya and Nguanguan fever, for example. In addition to these are the possibilities of virus and bacteria being genetically manipulated to produce new organisms. On page 110 in the same book, bottom of the page, they state, Just recently, a great deal of useful work has been done on the vervid monkey disease, African green monkey disease, which caused 7 deaths in Germany. Reports of progress were sent to 40 laboratories all over the world. 9 of them have been supplied with effective material and slash or anti-Sera vaccine. 4 in the USA and 1 each in Germany, Panama, South Africa, Uganda, and the USSR. A non-emphatic complement fixing antigen has been prepared to the WHO organization reference laboratories. So, like, to me, that's enough evidence to understand that these are man-made, created viruses, are viruses that have been altered by man to target particular populations, primarily Black people.
Yeah, I just want to keep connecting the dots. And she says, also from page 300, and in another book, A Higher Form of Killing: The Secret Story of Chemical and Biological Warfare by Robert Harris and Jeremy Paxman. The author states the claims continued in January 1978. A correspondent with Reuters news agency reported from NATO headquarters that specific experts had informed him that the Russians were developing 3 horrific new diseases for warfare. Lassa fever, which according to the sources kills 35 out of 100 people it strikes. Ebola fever, which kills 70 out of every 100, and the deadly Marburg fever, green monkey disease. And that's the end of his quote. And then she says, over and over again, the name African green monkey shows up. That is not a monkey biting Africans and causing disease, but a weapon of biological warfare developed in laboratories by people who classify themselves as white. This charge, however, is denied and blame is projected onto African Black people. So the purpose of putting AIDS is a WMD. So white people also owe us for that. So it just it's a lot to take in, and like the war against Black people is very real, and they're using like chemical warfare, biological warfare, disease warfare to kill us, and it's not okay, and it's really annoying to live in a society.
I can do.
You don't have anything else to share? Can we get the closing comments?
Like, you understand?
Yeah, sorry. I just received the message at the same time from work. It's kind of annoying. Ugh. Yeah, sorry. For me, this chapter is extremely important. It's necessary I feel like the reading list that she provides, I think it's important that we all like take the time to fill in that information and find out more about it, because it's an active form of racism that is occurring in all of and occurring is an active form of racism that is occurring. I'll never forget the day when Ebola had like broken out in Sierra Leone, and I was talking to like family members on the phone, and my auntie, because I always had like didn't understand under the white supremacy, but I understood that a lot of the stuff was man-made, especially because of the predictive programming. And my auntie had made a very clear statement and said that there was a well in the village provinces that white people went there. After that, people started to get sick, and now we don't go back to that well. That was literally her breakdown and understanding. And for me, that was, there was so much to that. Like, it was very eye-opening for me. It was like a testimony of these things are purposely being spread throughout Africa for the purposes of being able to exploit Africa, in the sense that the people have to worry about famine, destruction, health, before they ever think about self-actualization and mailing their own land and taking care of it, so their land can be exploited. So all of these disgraceful symptoms are placed onto us, and then this association with bestialities, they're also to further dehumanize and create that subhuman mentality to say that whatever diseases that we're struggling with, we deserve, in a sense. And I just find it very shameful and annoying that these constant associations are occurring from people who two people who literally civilized a civilization and told them what soap was and how to wash. I just think it's extremely disrespectful to constantly mark it as as we are unhygienic as to why we attract AIDS. We are filthy, which is why we attract syphilis. We are uneducated, which is how we eat bushmeat and get Ebola when we have mangoes dropping on our heads. It's just a rhetoric and story that needs to die yesterday, and informing ourselves with this, arming ourselves with this information, because when talking about eugenics, it's easier for people to believe you're talking about it's a conspiracy theory. It's easier for people to like be disengaged and not see it as like why would they employ biological warfare? Arming ourselves with this information will allow us to rightfully call them out and start to see some results. So that's something I definitely need to do from taking in this chapter.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Mary. And yeah, like living on this planet, we have to survive so much. You have to survive biological warfare attacks. You know, you have to survive like psychological warfare. You know, literal warfare of dodging the police, and it's just I'm glad we're all like have come to the realization that this is a serious problem we have to dedicate time and energy to solving, and that gives me hope. And I like to get my hope from like us actually doing things than getting on our hands and knees and praying to a God for hope. So this book has been like a hardening experience for me, and like this chapter is really fucked up. And she talks about like the big lie that Hitler used to like use deceit and confusion to destroy the Jews during the Holocaust. And the big lie right now is white supremacy. Like people don't believe in white supremacy, and that's the problem. They don't think it's real, and they're just taking it from Hitler's playbook. They've created a big lie. White supremacy is not real. That's a big lie. Oh, it's not that bad. That's a big lie. So, and I'm going to emphasize this big lie. Hitler, this is page 300. Adolf Hitler propagated his big lie against the Semites, the European nations, white people, Americans, the global white collective is now telling black people that racism is not a big problem. It's not as bad as it used to be. Adolf Hitler propagated his big lies against the Semites of the Jewish religion, which became his pretext for the planned slaughter of 11 million. He actually succeeded in killing 6 million, all in the name of white supremacy, racism, anti-Semitism, for the express purpose of white genetic survival. In the late 1890s, in late 1980s, there has been grave concern throughout the world that the white birth rate is declining as the birth rates of all non-white people continue to increase. It is at the same time we witness the sudden appearance of AIDS, primarily affecting black people in Africa and Haiti. As truth always surfaces in time, we will know the full details of the massive deception of the AIDS Holocaust when the current big lie is unveiled. So the big lie is racism, white supremacy, y'all, and I'm glad we all know the truth, so we may avoid our destruction. It's just making sure everyone else who needs this truth receives it. And that's my final conclusion, unless someone says something that gives me new ideas. Anyone else have anything to share?
for me, it was very simple. Like I understood this chapter from the first page. Basically, the mindset of white supremacy is very irrational, very destructive, but it's organized. It knows what it needs to do, and they do it quite well. They're masters of genocide, masters of deceit, and like just the fact that they create bioweapons, it's just the evolvement from the fact that they use germs to invade Africa. They use germs to take over, take this land from the natives. And this is not new. Like they use their own germs, their own bodies, as as biological weapons. And I think that symbolically just means that white people are diseases. White people are fucking no good for nothing. People who want the planet to be theirs. They want to be worshipped like gods. They have no problem depopulating black people from this planet. They proved it by the experiments. We learned about the Tuskegee experiment. We seen what they did to the Semites and Germany. We see what they're doing to the black people in Uganda, Ethiopia, and Africa with the Ebola. So we know what's going on now, and this was a great unpacking of the mindset, like of the very very violent, lying, maniacal mindset of white people.
I agree. As she said, they will try to maintain their survival by any necessary and conceivable means. If that's fucking dropping bombs on Africa one day to ensure their survival, best believe they'll do that. So we have to just really get the global majority of the world, the global majority of black people, non-white people, to hey, look around. You're being destroyed by white people. It's time for us to end it. Any more comment? Have anything else to
Yeah,
share?
I just wanted to say, F Bill bloody bastard Gates, and death to white supremacy and all this biological and chemical warfare that is done for our destruction. May all be reversed and turned onto them with the same intention. And may we rise, continue to fortify our genetic sphere and always heal from the biological warfare that's placed upon us. May may our strains of DNA continue to be resistant against it for the sake of our children and the sake of the future of the planet of the Earth, and all those who, with a smidget of intention towards biological warfare, may their money disperse and like disintegrate within their hands, and anything that they put on may never prosper.
Yeah, I agree. Their weapons will be turned against them by their own hands or their hands of justice. Should we, anyone have any closing comments they'd like to make about the chapter?
Yeah, for my closing comments, I think that this chapter is like really, really excellent. I think that the way she starts off by showing you like the white mind and how she like talks about how white people see us and see non-white people, and you know the like and the way that they kind of compare us to viruses, and then she goes on to really show like what white people are capable of in the past, and then making us see what they're doing right now. And I think it's really, really, really important, and I think it's such a strong way to end the book because it really shows like what we're fighting against and how organized and how like really strong the the powers against us are, therefore hopefully being like a rallying call for us to really take it seriously. So I just really like this chapter.
Yeah, thank you. I liked what Ashley said. The chapter for me was a little bit harder to understand, but after listening to you guys talk about it, really put it in the perspective. Definitely need to I think the message to take away from this is Black people definitely need to understand that, just because we're not being killed out in the open, like how the Jews are being killed, doesn't mean we aren't experiencing a Holocaust or a genocide. And so we need to recognize that. We need to be asking more questions when you see a number of non-white people and Black people dying by a disease or for any unusual circumstance. We should be asking questions. So that's what I took away from that. That's my closing comment.
All right, thank you, everyone. That's that. Completed book. Now we're gonna share our thoughts on the book.